You ever notice something strange about this business? Landlords upgraded everything around the property, but the way they actually run the property still feels old. The buildings got better, the finishes got better, the software got better, the cameras got better, the payment portals got better, the tools for screening even got better. But the actual operating system behind how landlords lead tenants, how they prevent issues, how they train behavior before it costs money, that part barely changed at all. And that's why you keep seeing the same situations over and over again. Different city, different tenant, different building, same outcome. A warning sign gets noticed. Nobody really locks in. Time passes, the issue grows. Then, by the time everybody's involved, maintenance, management, insurance, sometimes attorneys, damage is already done. That's the cycle. And landlords are acting like that cycle is just a part of the game. It isn't. That's a system. It may be a sloppy system, a weak system, a reactive system, but it's still a system. Waiting is a system. Delaying is a system. Hoping people figure things out on their own is a system. Reacting after the fact is a system. It's just a losing one. So let's break this all the way down. And I really mean break it down because this isn't about fixing isolated problems anymore. This is about understanding how problems get built in the first place. And when you go back in history, this is where people usually get lazy. They say something real quick, as I have done, like back then there were gaps and I moved on. That's too shallow. Here's what actually happened. When land was truly tied to survival, land control wasn't just about ownership, it was about food, shelter, protection, status, and you had a place, and if you even had a place in the world at all. If you were removed from the land back then, you weren't just losing an apartment. It was, in most cases, it was losing the ability to survive. That's why authority hits so hard and people move so fast. That's why small things were treated like big things because the cost of being wrong was brutal. And let's not sanitize that. If you were under the control of a lord, a crown, an estate, or some local power structure, the system was not built around comfort, fairness, or tenant rights. It was built around control and consequence. If something under your responsibility went wrong, the response was immediate. If behavior stepped out of line, correction came fast. In many cases, yes, the consequences were savage. We're talking about beatings, evictions from land, public punishment, loss of status. For some people, death followed displacement. That's the ugly truth. So no, we're not going back to some fantasy version of the good old days. We're not chopping heads off, throwing people off land into starvation, or pretending cruelty was wisdom. It wasn't. It was barbaric. But here's the part that matters. We replace the cruelty without replacing the behavior structure. That's the problem. What changed over time? Courts replaced immediate personal judgment. Notice replaced instant commands. Permits replaced direct action. Insurance replaced raw exposure. Property management replaced personal ownership of every consequence. Regulation replaced brute force. Formal process replaced fear. That all sounds more advanced, and in many ways, morally, it is. It had to happen. But what came with it was distance. Distance between the owner and the consequence. Distance between the warning sign and the action. Distance between the first report and the real response. Distance between authority and behavior. And once that distance got built in, landlords started living inside a dangerous illusion that delay is natural. It isn't. Delay trains behavior. That's the piece this whole industry still doesn't understand. Back then, behavior was controlled through fear and immediate consequence. Today, behavior has to be controlled through clarity, training, predictability, and repeated response. So now what happens? A tenant smells something strange in a room and says nothing because they've learned that strange smells do not always lead to fast action. A ceiling stain appears and they watch it for a few days because they've learned that reporting early doesn't always change anything. An odd odor starts coming from an appliance and they keep using it because they have learned that waiting is usually normal. Trash starts collecting longer than it should. Moisture starts lingering after showers. A hallway bulb burns out and stays out for a week because everybody adjusts. That's how modern property failure looks. Not dramatic at first, not explosive at first, not even expensive at first, just undefined. And once something is undefined, people fill it people fill it in with meaning themselves. That's why I keep saying this is not mainly a maintenance problem. It's not even mainly a tenant problem. It's a leadership problem. Leadership defines the meaning of a moment before that moment ever arrives. That's what landlords have not upgraded. They've upgraded the property, they upgraded the paperwork, they upgraded the process, they upgraded the tools, but they never upgraded the system that tells people this matters. This is what this is what it means. And this is what happens next. So now we shift into application, or we have no direction. You want to stop losing money? You want to stop reacting? You want to stop finding out late? Then you correct before you install. That matters, which is still useful, by the way, because it will show you exactly who can move with structure and who can't. But first, you correct. Here's how. The first thing you do is remove every place in the property where a tenant has to guess what important means. Walk the unit and ask a real question. Where could a tenant see this, smell this, hear this, or feel this, and come to a different conclusion than I would? That's your leak. That's your cost. That's your blind spot. Then you define triggers, not vague instructions, not let us know if anything comes up. That's weak. You define it specifically. If you smell mildew, report it the same day. If airflow changes in a room, report it. If a ceiling stain grows, report it. If you hear a new buzzing sound from an outlet, report it. If a vent stops pulling steam after a shower, report it. If a toilet starts rocking, report it. If a door starts dragging when it didn't drag before, report it. That's how you train awareness. You don't say watch for problems. You teach people what problems actually look like. Then you define response. That's where landlords destroy their own credibility. A tenant reports something early and you respond like it can wait. That one decision teaches them more than your entire lease ever will. If they report a stain growing on a ceiling and you say, okay, we'll try to get it in this week, you just train them that the ceiling problem sits. If they report a strange smell and you don't follow up quickly, you just train them that smells are not urgent. If they tell you a bathroom fan stopped working and you delay, you just train them that moisture can build before anyone moves. That's the real lesson they're learning. So your response has to be predictable. Same trigger, same seriousness, same follow through. Then, and only then, you reinforce. You don't teach once and hope it sticks. You repeat, you remind, you reward early reporting, you acknowledge correct behavior. Good catch. Thanks for saying something earlier. That's exactly what protects the unit. That report saves us from a bigger problem. That's not soft, that's system building. Because behavior comes from repetition, culture comes from reinforcement. And once the culture is right, the property starts holding itself differently. That's the real upgrade, what landlording never truly got. Train, protect, prosper. That's the Goldmine way. I teach before I tax. I partner before I punish. I build people, therefore I protect property. That's not a slogan. That's an operating standard. So, when you look at your properties now, stop asking what needs to be repaired first. Ask what still hasn't been clearly defined. Ask where tenants are still interpreting instead of understanding. Ask where response still changes based on mood, pressure, timing, and conversation. Because that is where your money is disappearing. Not at the dramatic end, at the quiet beginning. You don't lose money on the problem you finally see. You lose money on the behavior you never clearly trained before it got there. Fix that, and the whole property starts changing with it.